before the first European sail touched the western shores of Africa, before the cannons, the chains, and the cries that echoed across the Atlantic, there already existed a trade, a darker inheritance, one that had long been shaping kingdoms, toppling tribes, and defining power. This is not the story of blame. It is the story of how power itself became a weapon, and how Africa's own empires helped forge the first links in a chain that would one day encircle the world. Long before Portugal, Britain, or Spain carved their ambitions into African soil, slavery had already been part of its lifeblood. In the scorching valleys of ancient Egypt, slaves built the monument of immortality, the pyramids, temples, and tombs of kings. In Carthage, enslaved labor fueled one of the richest Mediterranean powers. And in Aksum, the Ethiopian kings inscribed their victories in stone, boasting not of wealth, but the men and women they had taken captive. Slavery was not foreign to Africa. It was an inheritance of power, a system woven into war, economy, and survival. Yet, these early systems were different, more domestic, more local. A slave might work in a household, or be absorbed into a family or army. Freedom was sometimes possible, until greed learned a new language. Centuries before the Atlantic slave trade, there were two ancient rivers of misery. The trans-Saharan slave trade, a 1,000-year journey across the sands. From the heart of Africa, chained men, women, and children were forced north, their feet blistering on burning dunes. 10 million souls would make this journey, sold into the markets of Cairo, Tripoli, and Marrakesh. Many never reached the desert's edge. The dunes swallowed their bones, their names erased by the winds. And beyond the desert lay another route, the Indian Ocean trade. From Zanzibar, Madagascar, and the Swahili coast, ships carry over 5 million people to Oman, Persia, and India. Their voices faded into foreign tongues, their stories forgotten in waves that still whisper their names. The lands of West Africa were rich, gold, salt, copper, and fertile soil. From these riches rose kingdoms, Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, magnificent empires whose power dazzled the ancient world. Mansa Musa, the wealthiest man who ever lived, ruled Mali in the 14th century. His gold-financed cities, mosques, and learning centers like Timbuktu. But behind this brilliance lay another truth. Slaves worked the mines that made his empire glow. The salt that crossed the Sahara, the gold that filled royal vaults, the copper that forged the spears of war. All were carried on the shoulders of the enslaved. In Mali and Songhai, slavery was not hidden. It was an institution. Slaves were servants, soldiers, and even tax payments. The wealthy imported Mediterranean women to serve in elite homes. The poor were vulnerable to enslavement after wars or raids. By the time the first European ships appeared, West Africa already understood slavery, not as a crime, but as a way of life. In the 1400s, the first Portuguese ships anchored off the West African coast. They brought gifts, mirrors, beads, cloth, and later, guns. They came not as conquerors, but as traders. At first, African kings saw opportunity. They traded gold, ivory, and captives taken in war. It seemed harmless, a continuation of old customs. But these strangers had come with a hunger that could not be fed. What began as trade would soon become terror. For every gun gifted, a raid began. For every barrel of rum, a village burned. And slowly, a continent began to sell its own reflection, piece by piece. Before the Europeans built their ships, Africa had already built the chains. But soon, those chains would be reforged, stronger, colder, and unbreakable. In the next episode, we journey into the age when men were sold for sugar and nations sold their souls for power. Like, share, and subscribe to Tales by Dosser Episode 2, The Chains That Cross the Ocean.